Hello and welcome to another episode of Quarantine with Fulbrighters. We have somebody who is an Ivy League grad with us, Mr. Hashim Kaleem, who has a master's in international education policy from Harvard. How are you doing, Hashim?
I'm doing well, Shazad. I hope you're well too.
I'm great. I have been following you, so I saw the news. Congratulations on beating Corona.
Well, thank you.
How is the experience like? So you tested positive on the 18th.
Yeah, so I tested, my results came out on the 20th. It was like a positive PCR. So I think I've been lucky in that sense that I had really mild symptoms.
Hmm.
The key symptom for me was anosmia, which is complete loss of smell and taste. And before that, I had like a very mild version of body aches as well, which, generally like we tend to dismiss them. And that's what my family did too. But then when I lost my sense and smell, taste and smell, I decided to get a test. But once again, I'm thankful that it was a mild version of it, and it seems that I've recovered.
So how was it like? Uh, Once you tested positive, did any of the symptoms get worse or did it stay mild throughout?
So I guess I mean it's different for different people, of course, because it's a novel virus. So there's only so much that even doctors know about it. So for some people, anosmia happens at the earlier stage of their sickness. And in my case, at least, and I've read some of the Facebook support groups as well, it was towards the end. So I really got tested towards the end of my sickness.
Okay.
And yeah, it's over now.
The worst is over. What other symptoms for people who are listening who might think they have corona and want to get tested? I think the loss of smell and taste that you talked about is very infrequently talked about, which seems like a
Yeah.
sure short sign.
That's true. In fact, I mean, even in some of the countries, like in the United Kingdom, for instance, it's only recently that they added anosmia as a key symptom. Before that, it wouldn't warrant a test. But once again, I'll be careful here because based on what I've read and based on what I've heard from people, COVID has very different manifestations in different people. So there's no set group of symptoms that would basically warrant a test. So I think people just got to be careful, even if they have like mild fever or even if they have very mild like body aches or something. I think the right course of action is to just isolate for 2 weeks at least, and hopefully within that time the illness should go away. But again, I'm not a doctor, so I normally don't comment on technical questions. I can generally tell people not to be so scared because that's what I experienced. I think in my case, at least, the anxiety and fear was worse than the disease itself. And I think there's evidence that it's directly tied to your immunity. Stress and immunity have like a link. So I think that's one area that we can, work on ourselves to make sure that we don't panic too much. I understand that it's scary, but it's also important for us to, keep your morale high and also got to take care of people around you. So it's important.
Absolutely. I think immunity is also not something that is talked about a lot. There's some studies now that they're linking a vitamin D deficiency to a higher chance of getting COVID. There's research now that it might be a blood vessel disease. We should
Yeah.
get a medical expert soon to discuss all of that. So let's now move on to your area of expertise, which is education. You teach at LUMS, you teach at a lot of high schools, and you're also developing something. What are you
Um,
developing?
so it was kind of like developed already. I'm just applying it. So I'm consulting for the World Bank for a project on primary healthcare in Punjab. So essentially, we're trying to develop a vital signs profile for Punjab, in which we look at and assess and examine the capacity of primary healthcare system. And we do so by applying like a model that was developed through a collaboration between Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, World Health Organization, World Bank, and an Ariani lab in Boston. And our job is basically collecting data here and making observations. And then based on that data, we kind of like submit our analysis. And in the end, it results in recommendations for the Punjab government in terms of priority areas, areas that need improvement. So yeah, it's been an ongoing project. We are towards the end of it now. We are in the process doing the summative report, but it's been a great learning experience, especially considering that we are in the middle of a serious health crisis. I think the kind of exposure and the kind of like knowledge that I acquired through my experience makes me develop like some sense of what's going on in Pakistan as well.
Can you expand on some of those observations, or is that all classified?
I think I think that in the case of Pakistan,
Hmm.
I've observed that there's a lot of like stuff in paper, like there's a lot of paperwork, policies and SOPs are in place, but it's really the execution end of things where, because of several reasons, I won't be reductionist in the sense that I'm going to say that it's a people or
Hmm.
no, I'm not gonna like. I don't think I can put a finger on exactly what's wrong, but I do think that the nature of the job is as such that it's difficult to execute because Pakistan is, fifth most populated country in the world, and public health service delivery is also quite a challenge as well. In some cases, because the areas are so remote. In some cases, because other infrastructure is not laid down. So I think that's one area where there needs to be kind of like more connection between provincial centers and areas that they're supposed to cater to. And in addition to that, I also think that like the public health delivery can benefit a lot if there's a greater collaboration between different departments and different sectors as well. So one thing that I've experienced is that a lot of primary healthcare delivery, not a lot of it, but a significant chunk of it also depends on collaboration between the school health and education department as well, because primary healthcare is really like the first point of contact between parents and doctors. So our aim is to shift the focus from cure to prevention. Our healthcare should be designed in a way that it really kind of attends to people before they need a cure for a certain disease or a problem. It should be really focused on prevention beforehand, right? So that's where I think like education department, water sanitation department, the importance of hygiene and all, these departments can kind of work together to make that delivery of public healthcare more effective.
So, are you suggesting that public healthcare has access or camps at primary school and primary care centers, or are you uh,
No,
maybe
they do
also
have
suggesting that there is an education element to this as well? That part of the education at primary level should be healthcare education.
absolutely. I think that's one of the more specific recommendations that can follow suit. But I think a model like this is already in place. Our job is to kind of identify what are some of the areas that require improvement, right? So it's not like a new thing that I'm suggesting.
Mm.
They already have it in place. It's just that it's one area that needs improvement, and that collaboration can be more effective.
Are there any specific fields that, in particular, they need to teach them about?
Um, Again, once again, I would avoid commenting so much on specific like technical recommendations
Hmm.
on what the primary
Bill
healthcare
Gates made
department.
you sign an NDA.
um, I think I'm only sharing as much as I can. Um,
It's fine. I wouldn't want you to be sued for this podcast. So let's move on to education now. You also teach critical thinking at LUMS.
yeah.
I wish
Um,
we had been taught critical thinking at LUMS. I don't think the course existed.
in fact, there was a course back when you and I were at LUMS. I think that you definitely were there. Like you were my senior by a couple of years.
Yes,
I
which was in 2019 when we just graduated a couple of years ago, and how young we are. Look at us.
Yeah, no, we can go for with that as well. But I think there was a course in place. Shabir Essen has taught that course, Logic and Critical Thinking, for a couple of years.
It wasn't one
Yeah,
of the mandatory courses though.
yeah.
Mm.
So I mean, I teach the academic writing course at
Okay.
LUMS, but the way I envision it and the way I look at it, I think over time, because of access to internet and because of like exposure to all sorts of social media platforms, really providing that platform for people even before they come to college to kind of like jot down their thoughts, express themselves. So I think that there has been like a general improvement in the writing standards of students that I am teaching over the years. I don't really have to cover the basics with them. The area that I do think requires more focus and attention is the critical thinking part of it, right? And now more than ever, because we live in a digital age with like massive influx of information. So I think it's important for students to, kind of like acquire those skills through which they could distinguish between fake news and authentic news. It is the age of fake news after all. It's important for us to instill those kind of skills in our students which would help them identify what qualifies as weak evidence, what qualifies as strong evidence, what are some of the warrants for a certain argument, right? What are some of the assumptions that are being made? And then through developing a better understanding, a clearer understanding of these smaller parts of an argument, I think they will be in a better position to understand the overall idea as well. So these are some of the things that my course at LUMS focuses on. And of course, at this point, we are transitioning to online teaching because unfortunately, based on some of the information that I've gotten from my department, it seems that LUMS will be going online for fall, and there's a high chance that they will be delivering online education in spring 2021 as well. So I think that's been quite a challenge, and we are in that process where, of course, it's a challenge for instructors as well as students as well. So yeah, that's what's up these days.
That is frightening. I do want to talk about online education in some detail with you, but just bring it back to critical thinking. I introduced critical thinking at a school in Karachi, and obviously my experience is based on that one particular niche school. But I'm hoping at college people are more ready to expand their beliefs and more ready to accept different opinions, whereas at the OA level, unfortunately the focus is all on grades, so all that anybody is worried about is grades. So when you try and introduce something like critical thinking and they do not have notes for that and they actually have to make an effort, there's a lot of resistance, not from just from the students but also from the parents. They don't even value that as a skill. They're like, can you just let us know the answers so that we can memorize them and get our A's and get into a great college?
Yeah.
So at a
Um,
place like LUMS, do you face any resistance?
I think, what you've just said is on point. You're absolutely right that we don't have such a problem at LUMS because instructors have a lot of autonomy to kind of design what they're going to teach, and that really kind of, has an impact on what the class discussions are like. And LUMS provides that kind of academic space, freedom as well for different kind of ideas to come forward. And you're absolutely right that this is something that has historically been lacking at schools. I'm aware of certain schools in Karachi taken this initiative where they are teaching things which are just beyond the Cambridge curriculum. But I've also been told that that practice has been now discontinued, and I think that's quite unfortunate. Um, I am a strong advocate and proponent of this kind of maybe like a civics course or a critical thinking course being introduced at all A-level campuses. And there are several obvious reasons for why we need to have a more localized version of, a civics or like a social responsibility course or a critical thinking course, whatever way you want to put it. I do think that there's some opportunity there because the course that I teach in high schools at A levels is called Global Perspectives in Research. And the idea is exactly the same. It is not a course in which students are expected to just acquire knowledge and reproduce that in an exam. In fact, it's a research-based course in which learners kind of identify um, areas of concern, issues that bother them, and then they, through research, kind of like propose different complex and comprehensive solutions to those unique problems that they have identified for themselves. So my students in the past have proposed very unique and effective solutions to problems such as youth unemployment, such as child marriages, such as violence against transgender persons, all of which are very like locally relevant problems. And their solutions also emanate out of their lived experiences in the local context, right? So that kind of like, I mean, I don't want to make it so jargonized, but it kind of like takes me back to some of the ideas that I got to explore in my grad school, particularly Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, in which I got introduced to the distinction between two different models of education. One is the banking model of education, in which we really treat learners as empty vessels in which we have to deposit our knowledge, and the instructor is this, he knows all, he or she knows all, and there's kind of like this hierarchy between the instructor and the students, and then students are then supposed to reproduce whatever knowledge they have acquired from the instructor. Freire argues for the problem-posing model of education, in which learners and their teacher collaborate with each other, and the role of the teacher is really that of a facilitator. And I've been in classrooms where the instructor would really kind of limit the talking time for themselves. I mean, if we would all sit in a circle, so just being on the same level kind of, I think, has an impact on the class dynamic. And I personally believe, and I try to kind of, as much as I can, I think this experience has inspired, has influenced my pedagogical practice as well. So I try to, through my course, Global Perspectives in Research, collaborate with my learners. And of course, I mean, it's a cliched thing to say, but I really kind of have experiences on daily basis where I get to learn so much from the perspectives that my students bring forward.
You also mentioned that you teach how to spot fake news, which I think is very, very relevant in these days where Twitter and Facebook are also trying to introduce fact checks. What are some of the things people need to look out for just to identify fake news?
So, I mean, of course, like there are certain tools that I share with my students. There are certain websites to which they can kind of like, do the basic work as well. But other than that, we teach them, more like general skills, which has got something to do with exploring and checking out the background of the person who's written a certain article. Is there any conflict of interest? Because many a times, even in like many popular and well-reputed news sources as well, the one that a layperson uses, such as New York Times or Economist or something, they have this like in fine print at the top, like whether it's from Associated Press, which normally means that this is like a paid partnership between a certain organization and New York Times or Economist, as a result of which they're producing or they're publishing a certain kind of work, right? So these are some of the cues that we look for. And of course, I mean, it's not like you can never be, absolutely perfect in this. Even, I mean, I'm an instructor. I also tend to make these mistakes, kind of like more impulsive emotional reactions to some of the stuff that I read online. But I guess it's a practice. It's kind of like something that learners kind of acquire over time. It's an approach that they need to kind of develop, and it takes time. So there's some of the things that we advise, like just a background check on the author, whether there's any conflict of interest, where it is being produced, what kind of evidence is being cited there. Just saying that a study found or researchers from an unknown university found, these are some of the alarms for us. And often we encourage them to explore their work cited or bibliographies as well, whether credible sources have been cited there. So these are some of the tips that we share with our learners.
Unfortunately, I think we've come to a point in terms of online news sharing that we almost need to bifurcate between outright fake news and journalistic bias. Journalistic bias may exist. Every single global news organization has a bent, has a tinge to it. Fox News may be a little more blatant, whereas CNN may be a little more subtle with it, but it definitely exists. Whereas we talk about certain organizations which are not credible at all, but are shared repeatedly. When we talk about Pakistan, there's certain channels or there's certain web channels like Hakikat TV which are outright fake news. So maybe even some things like if you just see one perspective and they go out of the way. If 100-word article is full of 50 praises for somebody, maybe take a step back and think about how fake this news is. Uh,
Yeah. And also kind of like takes me to the importance of looking for alternative perspectives as well.
hmm,
Perspectives that specifically, particularly are challenging one mainstream view, I think. Once again, it goes back to like an approach that a learner needs to develop, that it's important to look at the pluralistic views as well. It's important to kind of like triangulate your evidence as well to see if it's being corroborated by other sources or perspectives of other people as well. So I think there are different ways that learners can adopt. But I mean, of course, you're right that in case of Pakistan, it is concerning for me because even in terms of the response to COVID, it's very heartening to see lots of support groups popping up. But also slightly problematic as well because of all the advice that is being thrown around. And it's interesting to note that within the same thread, there are many like contradictory suggestions coming from different people, right? So I think that this is just like everyone needs to, take a step back. And I understand that the situation is as such that people feel that they're on their own, and then really to like social support they're going to get through this. I think once again that's heartening to see, but also people need to be very mindful of what advice they're giving out as well. I mean, of course, I've gone through this experience as well, but every single time, and I've got a bunch of people asking me about what medication to take, about whether Senamaki leaves were helpful or not, and what they need to do. They're asking for diet plans and all. So, I mean, personally, I didn't do anything specific or anything particular like magical and all.
Yeah. So what was some of the worst advice that you got? What was the one message that you got where you were like, how am I possibly supposed to believe that this will cure corona?
So I mean, of course, in my case, I didn't really get like a lot of random advice because I didn't really put it out there that I have COVID or something. I mean, I only put it up when I had recovered and
Yeah.
I just like, announced that I'm looking to donate plasma. There were several reasons for it because I think that there's a certain kind of stigma attached to someone who is diagnosed with COVID, and I experienced that firsthand when people kind of came to test the rest of my family members. They were really kind of like their attitude was as such that we had committed a crime. But I kept my calm, and I knew because I had some interaction with the primary and secondary healthcare department. I knew that this is not their domain or mandate. So that was a concern, but I mean, even while I was talking to some medical experts and doctors about the right course of action, because my father was a little ill as well, I did feel that even doctors are not fully sure about what's the best course of action to this, and that's understandable. That's understandable. That's not a critique of their anything that they said. It's understandable because many of them themselves concede that the virus is so new, the treatment is so new, that every week they're finding new stuff about it. So I guess just sticking to one person who you believe has the right kind of experiences and training, I think that's what you need to do.
I think trust the
Yeah.
medical experts on this one. Even if they don't have complete knowledge, they probably have
Yeah.
better knowledge than people telling you to take local laxatives to cure
Absolutely.
corona. Uh, s- so we talked about online education and digital education. How do you see that now that COVID is a reality?
I'm glad you asked that, Shazad, because I mean, I won't say I'm struggling, but I'm not too thrilled about online learning, digital learning, because I mean, of course, I mean, I think I have had the honor of working with some amazing colleagues, but I personally try to make sure that my classes are as interactive and as student centered
Mm.
as possible, right? This is something that this is what I study, this is what I try to kind of like implement in my practice as well, and that of course is a real challenge in online learning. The screen does not laugh back at your jokes. They're no
Hashim, the
Dewey Cover.
students didn't either, from what I've heard.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. I was just there's no response essentially. There's very limited response, which can be demotivating, right? And also, I mean, even when students in a traditional classroom, all the eureka moments as well, the aha moment when you can see those light bulbs where you realize that a student has learned something or has made a realization, which is great motivation for
Yes.
me. That is also missing in online learning as well. But I guess with time, we will adapt to this as well. We have to. We have to make sure that students keep learning. And of course, I think there's this hope that we will be back to the normal once again. But these ideas aren't new. For a couple of years now, people have been proposing, for the importance of blended learning and flipped classrooms as well. So I think that this is in one way it is like an opportunity for many of instructors and schools to kind of test their capacity and work on it if there's a need to. But I'm also concerned about what it means in the Pakistani context as well, because already there was everyone is already aware of it. There's quite a lot of disparity between the
Yes.
public and the private education system. We have the second highest population of out of school children in the entire world, lowest literacy rates in the regional context as well. So now, the way I look at it is that we were already on two separate tracks where there are certain students who are benefiting from the private education with all like the new IB system and the critical thinking and inquiry based program that we have talked about as well. And it was a distant reality for our public school goers who are still, I mean, struggling with enough basic access to enough basic resources, right? So I guess like this COVID situation might exacerbate that disparity now because some of them have access to like tools which can facilitate digital learning. Um, you need access to a fast internet. You need access to a laptop, and if you have multiple kids, you need more than one screens, right?
Yes.
So that is a challenge in some of the very privileged households as well. I can only imagine what it would like uh, you know, in unfortunately like underserved and low income households as well. So this is definitely like an area of concern that the government needs to think about. And I'm not saying anything like radical. This is something that people have been saying time and time again that education and health needs
Hmm.
to be our priority, right? It is already kind of like ignored, and even within the limited budget that it does get, it is not fully utilized. So this is a cause of concern, and I think in the past, public and private partnerships have been helpful. In case of Pakistan, there are studies that point towards the fact that a significant burden of the Pakistani population's education and literacy is taken care of by small-scale private schools. So I think that this is where this is once again like an avenue that can be explored further. Private schools have their own problems because I teach in a bunch of private schools. So I know for a fact that in this COVID situation, many parents are um, refusing to, make fee payments or are not in a position to make fee payments. That's understandable as well. And as a result of which, I've seen this like teachers being in a limbo, whether they're going to get paid or not, whether they should continue providing their services, and what is going to be the future of school education really. So I think that is where, based on my experience, first as a student and now on the other side of the table as a teacher, I think that one area that schools need to explore, something that I felt has deteriorated over the years, is school parent association, right? So when I was a student in one of these private schools, I think my parents would visit school more often, more frequently, and there was this sense of like collaboration. There's this sense of like shared governance as well, where students, where parents really felt that they had agency and they were very much a part of like how what decisions, not exactly what decisions the school is going to take, but at least like information was shared more frequently and more readily, right? I think schools are really doing a great job even at this point as well in so many other ways because they're faced with new and complex challenges. But one area that really kind of needs attention is this parents and school association, where we need to do away with more centralization of how education is delivered and really kind of focusing on the local needs of the community or the parental community that you are catering to. So I think that's one, you can think of it in terms of call to action as well.
Hmm.
But one idea that I'm thinking about these days, and I've had been fortunate enough to bounce off some ideas with my colleagues as well in faculty WhatsApp groups. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity that needs to be explored in these different domains, and I hope I can, play my role, a small contribution in kind of making the situation a little better.
I think you're absolutely spot on about both things. One, that you cannot replicate what it is like to be in the same space of learning, right? And as much as people are important, it's even the space itself. So when you go to an institution like LUMS or Habib University or AKU, the architecture contributes to your learning, just the fact that you're in that space. Uh,
Yeah,
and we don't know now that online learning is happening, what the situation in everybody's homes is like, whether they're even in a mind space. You spoke about the anxiety and fear of Corona itself, or
yeah.
their home situations might be different than somebody else's. Just being in that space affects your education. So, is there any way that teachers can mitigate the shortcomings of online education by certain tools or certain strategies?
I mean, honestly speaking, Shazad, once again, you shows that you're like a seasoned teacher as well. I also fully understand the importance of the socialization and
Yes.
that university campuses and school campuses provide. and how that is, in my experience, I think it's played a major role in what a student takes away from an institution or a school or a campus. I think there's only so much that teachers can do, because honestly speaking, I don't think that there is a very convincing alternative to the kind of socialization that a campus provides. But I do think that teachers um, also kind of need to reclaim their role of not just someone who's imparting knowledge, but someone who's friends with the students as well. So maybe like if you've got four classes in a week scheduled to deliver a certain course, I think it's okay for you to just take one of those lessons to just generally bond with your students, to kind of challenge them to create something which is collaborative, create something which is interactive, which kind of like gives opportunity to every single one of the class fellows to make a contribution. Could be like an art project, could be like a podcast, could be just checking up on each other's mental health as well. I've had some of those cute experiences with my students in my Zoom classes, where we kind of like collaborated to, sing that song, that jingle from the.
Hopefully, it wasn't Imagine like Gal Gadot.
No, we did the Commander Safeguard, Pakistan song together. So I had my djembe, and my students are like really great
Nice.
singers as well. So we managed to do that, and I think it was really cute. That was the highlight of my online teaching experience as well. So yeah, maybe like here's just an advice for all the teachers. You've done a great job. I know that this transition, this shift is quite a challenge, but just challenge yourself to do something out of the box, something which really kind of is easy to do, but also give students that break from that screen fatigue that they're in front of for several hours a day as well. So yeah.
And empathy is very underrated, right? Teachers who are insisting on the same old model, if they had a course outline which called for 6 tests to be delivered or 7 thesis papers and research papers, they're sticking to those deadlines without uh, cognizing the fact that people's household situations might be drastically different thanks to COVID.
Yeah. Shazad, I mean, I kind of like, I understand that in certain situations, and I've read some of the things that several students have posted about how online learning is a challenge. It's tedious. It's very demanding, and I fully empathize with that. But I mean, I was slightly surprised that there are so many problems. Of course, I think that their concerns are valid. I respect them. But in my experience, at least, the kind of faculty WhatsApp groups that I've been a part of, for instance, at LUMS, um, the faculty was unanimous that our students are suffering. They were particularly concerned about students coming from Gilgit-Baltistan with limited access to internet, with limited access to the screens that we've talked about as well. And I think that they were, I can say with confidence that if not unanimously, a significant majority of them expressed um, the realization and recognition that students are struggling. And I just really want to kind of like make a case for the empathy that my colleagues have, really kind of exhibited over the last couple of months. So I think that it's important for both students and teachers to understand that we are each other's well-wishers.
Yes.
And this is a very, nice bond. And I hope that this shift to digital learning does not have an adverse impact.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. The fact that students, teachers, and parents are all responsible for the learning, and if they can all work together and communicate with each other, like you said, parents being a lot more involved in the school associations and parental associations, and also maybe opening up channels with of communication with teachers beyond just the parent-teacher meeting, which happens once a
Yeah,
semester. That
yeah,
regular conversation will help teachers maybe understand what the situation is like at home for most kids, and will also give parents perspective as to what teachers are going through and schools are going through, and not have animosity on either side. Thank you so much, Hashim, for imparting us with all this knowledge. If
thank
there
you
is
so much,
anything
Azad.
that you'd like to end this with, you're more than welcome to.
I mean, I'd just like to end with a note of appreciation for you. I've seen you just like, really deliver master podcasts one after another. So thank you so much for having me on your, USEFP show as well. And thanks to Fulbright for organizing this as well. Keeps us engaged, and it's great to connect with fellow Fulbrighters as well.
Thank you so much, Hashim. It's always a pleasure to listen to Fulbrighters because um, apart from just the education and the theories, the person that you become having gone through the Fulbright experience is a lot of times underrated. So even the recommendations that you're providing, they may not seem that out there. They may not seem that novel, but the fact that you can articulate it, nail the problem, and provide those simple solutions that we may intrinsically know of, but will go a long way towards helping the entire system flourish. I think it speaks volume to the work that you've done and the person that you are. So thank you so much for everything that you do, Hashim.
That's very kind of you, Shazad. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back with another Fulbrighter next week. Take care. Goodbye.